Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke and I am so glad you're here. As you're learning and you visit this podcast, you're going to see that I have a lot of incredible guests. I have people that have been in the industry for a very long time. Many of these people have been guests of mine on my radio show that I did for over 40 years. And I'm reinvigorizing, if you will, bringing them back because they have more to say. And the people that have heard them in the past, they're going to want to hear the updates. And the people that have never heard them, they're going to enjoy the information. You know, I was having just a quick conversation with my guest before we signed on, and we were talking about, how the industry has changed, but also there's some things that haven't changed, some things that are kind of status quo. But what has changed is the way that we look at ourselves, the way that we take responsibility for our health, and that there are things that we may have to be looking at that we may never thought was an issue before. So I'm going to give you a little background on my guest today. My guest today is Chris Crawford. Chris brings over 3 decades of experience in the natural products industry to the table. His journey began as an independent health food store near Dallas, Texas, where he fell in love with, like we all did, vitamins, herbs, and the myriad of elixirs of life found in local health food stores. More so, even than products, his passion for people and the pivotal role of the human connection in both individual and community health journeys became paramount. His hand-on experience assisted customers, inspiring Chris to further his commitment to education by transitioning to the wholesale side of the business. Here, he sees the opportunity to educate and train store employees, account managers nationwide, while maintaining a unique connection with customers. Throughout Chris's career, he has held roles as a national educator, vice president of education, and even led a small coconut kefir probiotic company for several years. His educational philosophy is clear and compelling. I believe people are smart enough to make their own decisions regarding health. They just need solid, content-laden information to guide them. What a great quote, huh? For Chris, empowering individuals with knowledge and education is number one. As awareness grows, it leads us to a decision point. And Chris considers it a profound honor to assist people on their personal health journeys. Chris lives in Castle Rock, Colorado with his wife of 25 years. He has 3 kids in college. Hiking, skiing, and other outdoor activities drew the Crawfords to Colorado. He enjoys the benefit and the beauty of Colorado, as well as all the fun things to do in the mountains. One of his favorite activities is hiking Spruce Mountain with his daughters, his Labradoodle Bear. How cool is that? So help me welcome my guest. Hey, Chris, how are you?
I am great. How are you today, Jeff? Thank you for having me.
I'm awesome. I got to see you at Expo West, and it was great to touch base. We hadn't touched base in a while, and I was so happy when you agreed to come on and chat with my listeners and for us to get caught up, because I look at every single interview that I do is going to bring, even if it's only one good point, but I know with us we'll bring many good points. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. And I know we were talking a little bit before this, and I had a question for you about the name of your show. And so I know you had your radio program for almost 4 decades, and have been in the industry such a long time. We have a lot of overlaps, but your name to me was very compelling, Honest Health. And I wanted to actually ask you before we started getting into this, if you could just share with me like how you came up with that name. I think it's a beautiful name.
It's a real funny story. I travel around the country all the time. I teach and lecture and educate, and I do lectures all over the United States. And I happen to be driving through a really small town. Now, I had made the decision to do a podcast actually sitting on a beach in Florida. And in the middle of the night, it was so beautiful, and I decided that a podcast is something I need to do. And I've been being told by people to do this. So I digress. So back to this little tiny town. So I'm driving through this little town and I needed gas for the rental car, and it was really small. So I pulled in and there was a gas station. It was actually called Gas. And so it's probably kerosene, but I put it in the car, and as I was filling up, I looked across the street and there was a little store. It was a health food store called health food store. So when I was done with the gas, I went across the street and I went in to buy a couple things, some water and snacks and stuff, because I had quite a long drive ahead of me. And I was talking to the ladies that were in there and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And I introduced myself and they're like, "Oh my goodness, somebody from our industry coming to visit." And I'm like, "You don't get people coming to see you?" And she goes, "No." I said, "What about reps and educators and things?" And she goes, "No, we really don't." They've been there like 25 years.
Wow.
And she said, "We have a really decent clientele. We have people from like 7 or 8 of the smaller towns. They all come to see us." And I said, "Let me ask you a question. Are you computer savvy?" And they said, "Oh, yeah. And as good as we can be, but good enough." And I said, "That sounds like me." I said, "Would you watch a podcast?" And she said, "Sure." I said, "If there was a podcast that had the best minds of the natural products industry on it, giving their takes, what they knew, where we are, where we're going, from the people who helped to create this natural products industry, people with just, experience and knowledge and just, putting it all out there, would it be something you'd follow?" And she goes, "Absolutely." She goes, "We would tell our customers too, because if we have information, we can pass it on as well." She goes, "That would be great. We could have honest, healthful information." And I just went, click. So that's where the name Honest Health came from.
No, it's a great story. I love that story. And it also, too, it encapsulates so much of really what we do, right? Because you're in this small town, it's a very rooted, it makes me think of sort of this grassroots and just the rootedness. And, as things continue to evolve in our culture, as our industry evolves, but at the very heart of it is people and product and information and empowerment and connection.
Well, and you've been around a long time too, and I talk with people wherever I am, about changes that have happened in the industry. When I first started, it was a very, very select, very isolated, very niche kind of category in the world. People that were coming in, not too stereotype, but we had a lot of the patchouli, tie-dye, saging, wheatgrass drinking, yoga, lava lamp group, of which I was part of as well. So
exactly,
those are my peeps. But then it started to get a little better, and people were like, I want to try one of these vitamin things. And, there wasn't a lot of technology. I know I've shared with you that at that point I was doing radio shows. There was very little information. I had to go to the library. I lived in the library trying to get research books so I had enough to talk about, because I've literally done tens of thousands of radio shows, and you got to have information. And that was all we had. And most of them were research books. So if you didn't get to the library early, you didn't get a lot of information. So, we've had a lot of changes, and today there's lots of information, but how do you trust a lot of the information today? I kind of have become kind of jaded, and I think of a lot of it as more advertisement and people wanting to research to hear what they want to hear, because sometimes the real truth of things with our health we don't want to hear. I'm guilty. I don't want to hear that I have to make a change or drop 10 pounds or watch my sugar. I don't want to hear it, but I need to hear it, so the industry's changed a lot. What is the biggest change for you over your 3 decades that is a very noticeable difference?
Well, I think you hit it on the head, and I'm going to just sort of piggyback on what you said. But you were talking about information, the good content, and truthful content, honest content. And it's interesting because I've always said there's nothing new under the sun except for packaging, right? So, we go from round bottles to square bottles to packages to, Doritos in a can that sits in your car. And so we go through a lot of the same things, right? A lot of the same products, the same ingredients that we've come to, but how is it packaged, right? And so I think that over the years, it's interesting because over the years, just like yourself, worked at a small health food store, independent, and I'm just so grateful for them, man, and the time they let me research and read and learn. And one of the things is at that small health food store, I remember that's where I got my, it just wet my whistle, man. And I had to have more of that. And I think a lot of us have that same story. And one of the things over the years, I was meeting with a category manager in Asheville, North Carolina, and we're having lunch. And she said something that was, to me at that time, pretty profound. And she said, "Chris, won't it be great?" And this is 25 years ago. "Won't it be great when we have access to supplements and good food on every street corner? Right? On every 4 stops at the stoplight, right?" And at first I thought, wow, I was like, okay, do we want that, right? Because what does that do to the independent retailer? But her message was that we have a message to share, right? And we have health to share. And so the more that we're able to do that, the better. I think one of the things that I've seen though is that with this growth, and it continues to explode, right? So it's gone from the small niche health food store to then it's jumped in. Okay, we're going to have some chains that have product now in organic foods. I live in Colorado. There's a chain. It's a mainstream chain up here, and they have been doing organic food for like 30 years. And they were on spot on, right? But as more people enter the game, I think there's more choices. But sometimes more choices can be confusing to the consumer. And so I really look at like the educational piece is such an important piece, like what you do on a daily basis, Jeff, and teaching people complex thoughts, simplifying them, cutting them into bite-sized pieces so someone can then chew that, digest it, assimilate it, and then make their decision for themselves. And so to me, the basis and the roots are very similar if we get down to it, sort of the grassroots. What's changed is all of the fray and all of the packaging. Some of that, it comes with heavy investors. Some of that's good, some of that's not good, right? Yeah. We now have the opportunity to do gold standard, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies that are hundreds of thousands of dollars that allow us to make these really bold claims. And so it does help communication. So for me, I see that there's a lot of changes, a lot of shifts. However, at the foundation of it, we're dealing with people, product, placement, education, empowering people to help them make a good choice.
And well said. And I agree 100%. I finally found somebody that talks with their hands more than I do. So
I'll sit on them now.
No, I'm bad. I have to catch myself. But for so many years doing radio, nobody could see me. So it didn't matter. I could be flailing in the air and it didn't matter. So we're both guilty. No, you're all good. It's funny. I had to call you out.
That's awesome.
So, it's a wonderful industry. I mean, I really do like it. I tell this story all the time where when I was just first starting, it was like 1980, and I was at a store in Westwood, California, and it was a little health food store. And back then, it was, all out war with the medical establishment. We were arguing they didn't want it, and everybody was, this is witchcraft and all this craziness. And now today you segue and you've got doctors that carry supplements, write handwritten prescriptions. But back then it was really kind of interesting. I was working at this store, and we were closing up, and there was a knock at the back door, and I opened it up, and two doctors walked in. And I said to the manager, I said, "What's this?" And she goes, "They come to the back door to get their vitamins. They don't want their colleagues to see them in the front of the store." So that was a different mentality back then.
Sure.
And I looked at them and I'm like, "Really?" And they were just like, "Is what it is, kid." And I'm like, "Okay." So we've come a long way. And, I tell people all the time, I said, one thing that I love about this industry is that we are continuing to educate and provide information and provide education. But all we can do is put it out there. People have to want to read it, want to listen, and want to make a change. We know that in today's world, we should be exercising and staying active or doing something that moves our body. We know we should be drinking water. We know we should not be eating the food that we love the taste of, that we got hooked on because it's processed and chemical based, and we still gravitate to it because we love the taste, but we do it anyway, and we know we shouldn't be, at least all the time. We know all these things. But the interesting thing is, people focus a lot today on diet and those kind of things, but you individually have to be the person that makes the change. Nobody can make it for you.
Right. I mean, it is, I think that's, we do live in a day and age where we have so many choices, so much opportunity. I think there's as our world continues to progress, we also have lots more stressors, right? And so, the importance of making these good decisions is very important, and that's where I look at like your show, Jeff, or our fellow colleagues in our industry is really our role is putting our arm around someone and saying, hey, let us walk with you on this journey and help guide, right? And provide you the information so then that you can make your own decision for yourself. But we are bombarded 24/7. I mean, think about, computers when we started, computers weren't accessible. Information wasn't accessible. It was going to the library. And so I think like what you're doing, and I love, you've done this over the years with your radio program, but now your podcast, it's a trusted place. And those are sacred places in our culture, in our society. And so when we have a sacred place, whether it's in the health food realm or whether it's a library, whatever, in nature, but when we have that sacred place, we can go there and we can sort of settle in and we can become more grounded and more rooted, which then I truly believes allows us to take, okay, I'm walking into a health food store and there's 500 choices. Well, maybe that groundedness, that sacred place, that rootedness allows us to have 5 choices, right? Yeah. Because we've done our due diligence. And so to take everything and target it a little bit more and focus it a little bit more, because at some points it becomes this really buckshot. And that, I think that's where people can get overwhelmed or, we have lots of crossovers. It's like you said, the medical industry, there used to be never an integrative functional medical doctor. Now there are, right? Now there's naturopaths like yourself, right? And there are mainstream companies that would have never thought about carrying a sleep supplement that had lavender or chamomile or valerian. And true. These are pharmaceutical companies that have jumped in. And so the access to things is wonderful. And the access we have it really is unbelievable. But with that comes a great responsibility, because just to throw things at our body all of the time, that's very difficult and very, very challenging, I think, for our body. And then that causes a lot of disillusionment in the long run.
Well, another great point. Thank you. Someone asked me the other day, they said, do you think heart disease and cardiovascular disease are the number one health problems in this country? I said, well, they're bad. As well our blood sugar and, circulatory and all these other things. I said, but you know what I think one of the biggest problems that is so overlooked? And they said, what? I said, malabsorption. I said, we have damaged our guts and our GI tract so much with what we have thrown and continue to throw at it that in many cases, when we start to make changes, our body may not be capable anymore of actually making the changes we need to make. So I'm one of those people that recommend a digestive enzyme and a probiotic, not at 60, at 20, right. Because right. I think we need to aid it a little bit more, because one of the biggest problems we have, and it happened again this year, it happens every year, New Year's resolutions come around in January and everybody's like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So a really good friend of mine, very intelligent, CEO of a large hotel here in Vegas, he says, I talked to him in the middle of February and he said, look, I changed my diet. I'm going to the gym. I don't feel any better. He goes, and nothing's right. He goes, I just want to go back to where I was before. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. How's your gut? And I throw this out all over the country, this question, and get deer in the headlights. He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, how's your stomach? And he goes, well, I have a lot of problems with my stomach with gas and bloating and heartburn. And I take a Prilosec and I take a proton pump inhibitor and yada, yada, yada. And I went, And he goes, why? And I said, so you have a damaged, compromised gut. He goes, yeah. And I said, you're shutting down what it can still do with an acid proton pump inhibitor. And he goes, okay. And here you are bringing in all the good stuff. And now your body doesn't have the capability. So how could you possibly feel different if you're keeping it from getting to the point when it could be utilized, absorbed to give you that feeling of a change? And he just went, oh. He said, well, I've been on this other one for so long. I said, did you ever read the box? And it says take for 2 weeks. And he went, no. And I said, would you be willing to try something? Sure. So he picked out a digestive enzyme and a probiotic, and we moved him over to a Mediterranean diet. He was almost
Oh,
there,
nice.
an anti-inflammatory-ish diet.
Hmm.
So I moved him over and I said, let's have a talk on, beginning of April. And he goes, okay. So he called me the middle of March and he was just like, oh my goodness. And I said, mm-hmm. And he goes, I feel so much better. I don't have any of those stomach problems anymore. And he goes, I have so much energy. I've dropped like 15 pounds. And he said,
Wow.
I'm feeling really, really good. And I went, uh-huh. And he goes, so you knew I was going to say that. And I went, I was hoping you would. And he said, he goes, I was relying on an instantaneous magic wand, but I didn't realize that I'd done a lot of damage to myself by my own knife, fork, and spoon. And I said, exactly. I said, but now you're correcting it. I said, do you want to go back to the way you were? And he goes, no. And I said, okay, good. Mission accomplished.
Exactly. You know what? And it's step by step, right? And, one of the things that you say, Jeff, I love it because it does. We used to say you are what you eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's truly you are what you absorb and assimilate.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
in our standard American diet, we eat more calories trying to get more nutrition, which doesn't always add more nutrition. And so hitting that baseline level. And you know what? I mean, it's a great picture of our industry, because it does get back to the very much of the baseline foundational principles that we've grown to know and love. And sometimes we can get, running all over the place looking for answers when the answer may be simple, right? Mm-hmm. And it may be coming alongside someone and someone having a trusted source, because I think that the trusted source is a large piece of it right now. What do they call it? Dr. Google. And I mean, we have so much information at our fingertips. And so to have good information, what a great story, man. I love that. That's what the epitome of our industry, right?
Well, and to all this great information, I think we're both making really good points. I think that, what has changed in the industry? Well, we have tablets, we have capsules, we have soft gels, we have powders, we have effervescence, we have liquids. Why do we do that? Because we're trying to accommodate, and gummies. We're trying to accommodate people to find the best source of delivery for them. Funny story. I have a couple sets of twins I've been waiting on for over 40 years, and they're identical. Now, the thing is, genetically, they're identical, but they live different lives. One has money, one doesn't. One's active, one's not. One smokes, one drinks, so they have different habits. So people would think that their nutritional programs would be identical, but no, they're completely different because they live and their lifestyle choices are completely different. So when I meet with them on a 1-by-1, when they look at the end, they're like, we're not doing anything the same. I said, because you're not. I said, you just happen to be genetically the same, but that's all. So we have to remember that not everybody fits in the same box. And that's one of my peeves with many industries, but especially ours. If there is a product, and I have launched hundreds of lines of products over my decades from many wonderful, reputable companies. Mm-hmm. That being said, you have to be careful because there is a product. Let's say it's a groundbreaking product and it's taking the country by storm. Right. It doesn't mean that every person will react the same exact way. Everybody may react differently. You may need to fortify it with something else, take more of it or less of it, take it at a different time of the day, because we are all so different. We don't fit in the same box. I wish they would throw that box away. Tired of it. People trying to fit in there because we are different. This is where health food stores make a difference. That's where podcasts make a difference, because you can get questions answered. You can walk in and have a conversation about you and how it relates to you, not how everybody else is doing, but me. This is what's happening with me. And you need to be able to have these conversations. Never be intimidated. I mean, my grandmother used to say it. So many people used to say it. The only bad question is the one you don't ask, because if you don't ask, you don't know. And wouldn't it be frustrating if it was that one question you didn't ask that was the last piece of the puzzle that made everything else work, but you were intimidated. You didn't want to bother somebody. Bother us. Ask us a question, because it's important for you to be able to realize that change, sometimes we need help. And it's not a problem to ask for help in every part of our life.
True. It makes me think of the story you told about the health food store, right? That is a sacred place for individuals in the rural areas that come to that from miles around to get their information, right? And so as our culture becomes more homogenous, right? We speak to the generalities a lot of times, right? And so, like you mentioned, here's two sets of twins that genetically pretty identical, right? But then you get back to lifestyle. Even if their lifestyle was similar, even if their diets were similar, they still are unique individuals. And that's the beauty as well, because it's an art and a science, right? I mean, there's science, but also too the intuitiveness, the art of, you're a master herbalist, right? You understand how herbs are put together, why you put certain things with certain other things to help the body move forward, right? And, we have, whether it's Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, eclecticism, Thompsonian medicine, master herbalist, we have all of these different things. And if someone's very science, well, guess what? We live in a world now that you can go and you can look at public records, public health, and find good research. Like the German Commission E. They were the first ones that years ago talked about, right? 120 milligrams of ginkgo biloba standardized at 24% ginkgo flavoglycoside, 6% terpene lactones, taken for 6 weeks, increases oxygen flow to the brain, right? Well, we have a ton of that information now. So we really do have the ability to customize people's programs, for people to customize things towards them. But it's like you said with your friend, it starts with a single step. And so the thing that we can do is do one little habit a day, right? And they say that, one little habit a day, it changes things and it creates a momentum. And so I think a lot of times it's this, like you had mentioned, it's sort of this, it's a new year, new you. And you go, okay, I have this huge goal. How am I going to get there, right? But then just saying, okay, well, let's take that and let's cut it down into bite sizes. Let's cut it down into pieces, and let's just be fair to ourselves for a moment, give ourselves a little grace, and do what we can do. If we have a bad day, we have a bad day. Guess what? There's tomorrow, right? There's the next moment. And so it is a moment by moment thing. And so it is very, very imperative in our culture that as our age continues to increase, right? We're starting to see a lot more cognitive issues. That's always in the news these days, right? You talked about cardiovascular, but everything's cognitive, Alzheimer's, dementia. I don't know if I should use the word Alzheimer's on the show, but it deals with cognitive health, right? So all of a sudden, we have folks that let's say someone retires at 65, they may live another 30 years, right? And so that's a really, really important. So we're almost doing our homework ahead of time so we can continue to be healthy and step towards it. So as we age, that we have the opportunity to live a full and vibrant, optimal life. And I mean, I think if you talk to most people, I mean, they may say it in different words, in different phrases, but at the heart of it is everybody wants to live a full life and an optimum life. And it's just, it's a step by step to get there.
Well, and I think everybody does want to be healthy. And I think that, but sometimes I think there's the mentality. I was talking with a friend recently and he said, I've got to go to the dentist. I haven't been in like 7 years. And I said, okay. I said, he goes, for a while there, I just didn't want to go. And now it's been so long, I'm afraid to go. And I said, well, you need to go. So I hooked him up with a friend of mine who's a dentist, and he went and he called me after and I said, well, and he goes, wasn't as bad as I thought. He goes, I got a good cleaning and I only had one small cavity. And I said, now moving forward, he goes, moving forward, I'm going to go every 6 months. But if you think about people that let things ride and they don't want to deal, they've got so much on their plate. They're juggling, 15 balls in the air all the time with work and deadlines and family and coming out of the pandemic and just all these other things that they thought of changing their diet, exercising, focusing on self-help. They have pushed themselves so far to the back burner that they're not even existing in their focus anymore because everything else has come to the front. And I think we get lost. And I think once we gain back that little bit of self-focus, even if you're giving yourself a little bit more priority, you can start to see changes. And we're very motivated by change. The problem is we have no patience. We want to fix everything. We want to lose 40 pounds by Friday, and it's Tuesday. We want everything fixed. We don't realize that it took us 10 years, 20 years to get to where we are. We just want these quick fixes. And you got to be patient. And the problem is patient is not a value that a lot of people have. I mean, patience is something that took me a long time to learn to appreciate because I was always impatient. And I got to realize, talking with someone who was much older than me in her 90s, who kind of snapped me out of that being impatient kind of focus. And it taught me a lot. And I'm realizing that not everything comes really fast, but if you're making a slow movement, very slow, but you're heading in the direction, that's progress, man. Just be patient. Let your body get with the program. Let your head get with your body, get with your heart, get with your emotions, and appreciate and prioritize yourself, because that's the only way you're going to ever win.
I agree. And one of the things, Jeff, one of the things you just said, it really stood out to me, is you said that you had a friend in their 80s or 90s, right?
And so, a lot of them.
Right. And so one of the things is a lot of times in our cultures, we become more homogenous, like we were talking about. So I'm going to hang out with the people that are exactly like me, the same age group, and on and on and on. And so we've lost the generational aspect. And so having someone like that has the ability to say, hey, I've lived 90 years and these are some of the things that I've learned, right? Or that you've done this for 40 some odd years and myself for 30 some odd, that you go, it's well seasoned, right? And so I do look at a lot of even our responsibility, Jeff, is as the next generation of folks come and lead the industry, that it's very important. It's very, it's not just a source of pride, but it's important that we also share that information, just like you're doing. And that's what this podcast has the ability to do. And so that's such an important thing. And I think also too, in the independent health food store, one of the things that we've seen shift over the years is, I remember standing with people and talking to them for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, right? And that's hard to do these days. Things are judged on labor budget hours and the bottom line, which is fine. I mean, the bottom line has to exist for us to exist. However, it's also it's important to find that place, right? That place that you can go. And so, no, I love that. I love that story though, because it speaks really volumes to to having mentors, friends that are older, mentors, friends that are younger, that we have the ability, our folks that we can mentor even, right? So,
it's interesting. I have this thing I call light bulb therapy. And it basically is when I'm talking in front of an audience, I'm waiting for those looks when the light bulb goes off and somebody goes, oh, I get it. Because if you're watching your audience and they're glazing over, you have to come from a different angle, because I'm trying to achieve light bulbs all over the room, so, and once I start to get those, you start to see in people's faces, they're like, now I get it. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, now I understand. And that's what it's all about, because sometimes, and I've been to so many lectures over the years and so many educations and stuff. And some people have a tendency to think that you have to talk on such a technical level all the time. And you know what I've learned in my 40 years? Retail employees, management, consumers. Basically, what people are looking for when you're introducing and talking on a topic is, what is it? What could it do for me? When should I use it? Can I use it? Am I a candidate? And how much is it? That's really what it comes down to, because I have people that want to talk on a really technical level, and I can do that if they want to. And you want to talk about all that stuff, that's great. But today, in a world where we have so much on our plate, I just want to tell me what it's about. Is this something I can use? Is this something I'll notice? Is this something that's going to help me 30 years down the road? Or am I going to notice something within a couple of weeks and feel better and see a change? If that's something, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, that's really true, Jeff. I mean, one of the things that we're talking about, things that we've seen over the years, and one of the things that I love that a lot of, I think, companies do, and yes, it comes from marketing perspective and things like that, but bullet points, right? So if we can take a complex subject and break it down into very quick bullet points for people, it's easy to absorb, and then they can make that choice, right? But like you said, 95% of the people, they don't want to know about the molecular, whatever it may be.
Sometimes I don't want to know it either. So come
on. Exactly. It's a lot of times it's fun stuff to talk about periodically, but the reality is part of I think what our industry is really good at is also welcoming people into it. And so that means being approachable, the ability to connect with people. I mean, connectivity, it's the most important part. I mean, I always, when I know you've traveled with many reps throughout the years, and I said, ultimately people buy from people, right? And so you could have a product, you can have amazing products, but if someone talks so technical or over someone's head or dumbs someone down, they've lost it, right? And potentially they walk away from our industry, right? That's one of those things that I was always concerned about throughout the years. And so I really believe that that's why it's very important to be responsible with our information, how we communicate that information. And at the end of the day, it's that person that's the receiver of that. And so it's connecting with them where they are. It's not necessarily what I want you to know, but that's why questions are so important, Jeff. That's why your radio show, and I talk about your radio show a lot because I love it over the years, but
thank you.
Great questions, right? And, the more questions we ask, the more we understand, right? And the more we have the ability to come together and then put the right products in people's hands or the right lifestyle in people's hands. And so, it really does come it's a very holistic aspect.
True.
And, I know, like yourself, I know some smart people, but if we cannot connect with someone, it doesn't matter, because they will go somewhere else and find someone that they do have the ability to connect with. And if they're getting good information or bad information. So.
I've learned over the years that people tell me, they go, I've never heard anyone educate like you before. And I'm like, okay, explain. And she said, you poke fun at yourself. You tell stories. She goes, you're on track and you go over here and tell a story and then you come back and pick up where you left off. And I said, when I first started, I wanted to make sure that things can be entertaining. You can be entertained and engaged and still learn at the same time. And I said, that's just kind of who I am. I don't fit in any mold, I really don't, but you'll walk away remembering me, remembering what we talked about, and you'll feel better. And that being said, we're up against our time here. I would like for you to leave everybody with your thought of the day, something coming from you that you would like to leave people with.
Wow, that's a great question. I didn't prepare for this, but
that's the best way.
That is the best way, right? You know what? I'm reading a book right now, and one of the things that this book does is it's by a neuropsychiatrist, right? That has clinics all over the United States, and it has a very short one thing to do every day, just really basic, right? I mean, such as like, hey, what are your goals, right? How do you look at this? And so ultimately, I would encourage people to love yourself, be fair to yourself, take care of yourself, because the more we do that, the more we're able to serve others, connect with others. And ultimately, it makes us, I think, happy people. And it makes us live in a community where it's very, people are receptive to that kind of love and embracing. And our world needs a lot more of that right now.
I think we need a lot of it. I think we need to put it in the water supply. I really do. My name is Jeffrey Burke. This is the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. Remember, you can listen to this on Spotify. You can also go to the YouTube channel, same name, Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. Make sure you like it, you follow it, you subscribe, and all that stuff. This is new to me, so bear with me. So I hope that you'll do that. Bring your friends, because if you love your friends and you love your coworkers and you love your neighbors, we want them to be part of this as well, because if they walk away every podcast with one piece of information that could be life-changing for them, that's what we want to do. I want to give my thanks to you, Chris. Chris Crawford, my guest today. Thank you so much. And
thanks,
what an
Jeff.
absolute pleasure. Will you come back and see us again?
Definitely. Always love it. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Take care. Remember, Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. Have a great day, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.